Are you ready to perform at your highest potential? Thank you for joining this GP Strategies webinar, where we'll explore best practices and innovative insights to help you and your organization improve performance.
So hello and welcome to today's presentation, Human Plus AI, leveraging AI to empower your workforce. We have our presenters today. We have Carrie Williard. She is the Chief Customer Strategies Officer for GP Strategies. Welcome, Carrie. We also have Matt Donovan. He's our Chief Learning and Innovation Officer for GP Strategies. And we also have Julian Mackey. He's a guest today, and he's the head of enterprise partnerships with UpLimit. We do have a really great presentation for you today. And with that, I'm going to hand it off to our presenters.
All right, thank you. With that, Kim, let's just dive into the next slide. So welcome to our session on leveraging AI. So we're going to do a few sections today. Why this moment is different. And so we'll do just a little bit of background on getting on the same language terms. We're in this transition period where some people know a lot, so some people know a little. And so, we'll just have to see. Then we'll do then Matt's going to do human plus AI equation. And then Julian is going to share with us a little bit about exploring what's possible. And we'll leave some time for Q&A. Thanks. Next slide. All right, let's go on into why this moment is different. So, Kim, please advance the slide. So I think the longer we're in this, the more we're starting to see that this can be a very revolutionary moment and not hyperboles. Andrew McAfee and others said business leaders should view it as a general purpose technology, almost the same as electricity, the steam engine, and the internet in terms of how much difference it's going to make in our lives going forward. And the pace of change, next slide, please. The pace of change is just dramatic. There have been, AI has been around for over 70 years. There were three big waves, and this handcrafted wave was the first wave that included Gary Kasparov being beaten by IBM's Deep Blue, and that was when specific rules were written by human software programmers. So we kind of call that handcrafted. And then the reason there's a cat in the picture of this second way is that one of the things that happened over at Google was they were training the computers on identifying features of thousands upon hundreds of thousands of pictures of cats. And the machine started to be able to exact attributes from large data sets. And then now we're in the last 4 years in generative, where it can create new content based on large amounts of data. So when you hear people talking about we have software with AI, you also need to know, okay, what phase of AI? Because there's 70-year-old AI technology sitting in many programs, and just to juice it up a little bit does not necessarily make it this newest generative wave. All right, next slide, please. And I heard an analogy by Daniela Rus, who is the executive director at MIT's Computer Science AI Lab, and that I think really helps people understand how generative AI works and how large language models work. She likes to read cookbooks before she goes to bed at night. And so she's got a big stack of cookbooks next to her bed, same as I do. I have magazines and cookbooks and so on. And she said, but rarely do any of those recipes ever get made. Instead, what happens is she's kind of absorbed these things. And when it comes time to cooking, she knows, for example, I might make a salad that's got balsamic vinaigrette and greens and goat cheese and pecans and cranberries, and that's going to work even without having an exact recipe, because she's read so many recipes and eaten so many foods and just kind of knows that these things will go together. They're more likely to be connected to one another in a dish. And that's kind of how large language models work. They are predicting the next word, the next phrase in the solution, the best picture, based on having read the internet and beyond. So, it's not something that somebody's programmed. So you can't pry it open and see how it's thinking, because it's just associating from all the things. So I think that's a really good way to think about how a large language model works, if you haven't heard that analogy before. Next slide, please. So, and I think one of the things that's really important, when I was writing our last book, Stretch, about how to prepare for the future of work, one of the things that we came up with was a set of strategies. And one of them is you've got to figure out what to unlearn. And there's a lot of unlearning that we have to do about AI. So for example, we always believed that that AI would be the tasks that are repetitive, that you could train something to do repetitively. And it's turning out that's not what AI is doing for us. Just a number of studies provided by Ethan Mollick out of Penn. Right now, if two people, a human and AI, are given a debate to win, AI is more likely to persuade you than an average human. Not only through logic, but through like the compelling evidence it can bring up. If you're in a funk and you ask AI to help you reappraise a difficult emotional situation, it's doing better than 85% of humans at doing that. In a judging cases where people are pitching startup ideas, AI is coming up with better, faster, cheaper startup ideas. And AI beat primary care doctors on 28 out of 32 characteristics. So that's already what AI can do today. We don't unleash it to do all of this, but in the studies that are being done, AI is able to do this much and more already today. So I think it's going to be really interesting what it can do tomorrow. Next slide, please. Microsoft, of course, is one of the leaders in AI, and already they're finding that 46% of new code that's committed is written by AI, and developers feel more focused on satisfying work and feel like they are working faster. And note that even though 46% of code is committed by AI, it has not replaced 46% of developers. It's made them able to advance their work in other areas. So there's a lot of fear of people losing jobs and so on, and at least in some of these early areas, it's not leading to that. Next, please. So I'm going to turn it over now to Matt, and hey, I think I'll throw in one tidbit. One tidbit is that all of you have been training AI for a very long time. So every time you had to check one of those CAPTCHA or reCAPTCHA things to say, is this have a traffic light in it, or does it have a cat in it, or does it have a bicycle in it? That actually, the background has been training AI all these years. So you continue to train AI in the background on recognition and so on. So you can claim now to your friends and family that you've been training AI. Matt, over to you to do the human plus AI equation.
Thank you. Definitely one of my highlights I like to talk about. Let's go ahead and jump on into this. We'll hit the next slide real quick. So what's interesting is when we talk about that human plus AI conversation, and I think before we get into this real quick, I think when we look at the workforce of the future, we're no longer just talking about humans. We're really looking at the concept of human plus AI equals that workforce that we're talking about. So it's about humans and AI working together as we rethink the work that we're doing and how we're doing it. Is going to really be important out there. But that is, the thing is that we talk a lot about we have to be the humans to be the human in that human plus AI conversation. I open it up here with this is a great a research piece, an academic article that was shared out. This is just a small excerpt from a very large publication on this. It really the jagged frontier, and what they're talking about here is kind of calling out what are some of the things early on that we were seeing that AI was enabling us to do. So first thing that they came out with, and this is looking at consultants. So this is in the space of consulting, and there was looking at two types of tasks or activities, strategic and one on creativity. And they were able to kind of look back and said that not only were the bottom half of the performers, the folks that were probably at that moderate performer level, they were actually getting a boost in working with AI in their productivity or their outputs, but they were also the top end as well, were also being enabled as well. But they also learned that AI at the time is good at some things and not as good at others. And what they began to find is that between the two, that correlation between the human expertise with the AI and those areas of strengths actually together created the maximum output of productivity. So it is showing that we are seeing these gains, and this is not the only one that's come in. There's been several research components. Carrie showed a few more before, but this isn't just conjecture. This is actually being reinforced by evidence-based research out there. So yeah, these are things, and the key is we talked about is knowing where those strengths and limitations are, which I think brings us into the next slide. When we start to look at, and we can jump ahead, there we go. You know, the big giveaway here is that we don't believe that AIs are going to replace the humans, but humans with AI will replace humans without. And that comes from a Harvard professor who shared this, but I'd say it's been pretty much becoming a standard sentiment. It's also what we're seeing in research from executives as well. They're seeing that the workforce will be more augmented than fully replaced within that. But it comes back into us needing to learn how to actually work with AI, leverage AI. And this has actually been a very freeing quote early on. Carrie, myself, and I'm sure Julian, you got some of these questions as well. People were asking, is AI going to take my job? And that was one of the big concerns that I think folks had, is that, and when we started talking about it's probably not AI, but it's somebody who uses AI better than you, that almost gave you a sense of something I can work with, because AI seemed to be so daunting as kind of a foe out there. But now knowing that I can do things to have a little more my fate was critical with that. So let's jump to the next slide. And I think it's going to really identify some of the concerns that we had. So I talked a little one about, you know, is this going to be, we have job threat here at the bottom. Is this going to take my job away from me? But also, you know, interpersonal trust with it. Can we start to work with it together? Competence, is it going to give us accurate information? Things that would fold underneath this would be like hallucinations, incorrect data, biased information coming in, you know, just randomly bringing things in. So there's been a lot of progression around remediating these concerns. And so there are things that you can do personally to take accountability to work through that. I think one of the things is absolutely emphasizing the human capabilities. Again, it's focusing on that human and the human plus AI conversation, balancing the pros and cons, but deeply understanding what it can and cannot do, where its limitations are. And then focusing on experimentation and pilots to really understand how you're going to work with it over time. Because it's one of these things, you can't just think your way through it. You're going to have to really practice and apply a lot of energy and effort. We highly encourage the exploration and playing with it, not only just prompt engineering, but applying it to a range of problems or solutions, rethinking the way you're doing work, bringing AI into it, playing with it. And then most importantly is really spending the time and energy to upskill and train your employees, your teams, your coworkers, et cetera, on how to use this. So again, it's not something that you're just going to roll out, do once. What we're finding is that the integration of AI is really much deeper about a change management issue with a very human component in that. And it's not something you're just going to roll out like a technology training. We're going to teach you a platform and you're done. There's a lot more that comes with that. So let's go to the next slide. And it's really going to, bring up how we start to think about integrating AI into what we do. So there's three things that AI kind of, in a very reductionary manner, we look at that it's going to help us with automation. Generation is going to create and generate new content, ideas, images, things like that. And then being able to look at large data sets and come back with predictions. So these are three things that AI does really well. So as we look at the work that we do regularly, how do we start to think about sharing that load with AI so that it can help us with automation of tasks or generating a copy and things that humans can then review and even extend on, and then being able to see things we can't see in large scale amounts of data. In addition to the ways in which we integrate AI into the way we get our work done or the way we work with it, we also look at them in 4 roles. And it's really important that AI is more than just a tool. It's not a transactional tool. And what we've seen is most organizations that are getting early success, they're thinking about them in the work we do and integrating them as assistants, peers, and managers. And yes, I said manager, and I will tell you that although I'm an AI enthusiast, I'm 100% pro-human in this whole equation of what we're looking at. But even when I heard at first the concept of a manager, it made me really kind of bristle when I heard that. But when I take a step back and I think about it, so if you think of a leader's role, there are probably activities in the role of a manager or a leader and things that they do where integrating with AI that AI are probably better at than they would be. So if you were able to automate or help enable through generation or even be able to delegate work. So think if you're working on an agile team and you're working on a backlog, I could imagine a bot enabling the team to be able to manage the backlog in an actual agile working team. In their progress. So I think we start to need to redefine how we think of when we say managers and peers in that AI plus human. And this is reinforced with a lot of the periodicals you see here on the right, a lot out there going on. But these are 2 ways we start to think about when we bring it together. Let's go to the next slide.
Oh, Matt, can I just say something about managers? Because there have been some studies done, and think about it. If you're on a phone all day as, say, a customer support agent, you can have a manager, we'll put in quotes here, in your ear, who you can send and fetch to go do things as well. So humans aren't likely to send their manager off to go, hey, would you go look up when that invoice was actually issued? But you can do that if you've got an AI manager in your ear who's also reinforcing and looking at tone and so on. So I think it's going to be in more limited cases like that, where the people can actually see the benefit of a manager-partner kind of relationship. Yeah,
it's a totally interesting case. I mean, I think we've seen a lot of those where you see like those empathy bots you were talking about in the call centers being able to help walk along the side of them to enable the human to bring in skills that they alone themselves might not possess. But when you think of human plus AI as a skill, being able to deliver the skill, it's fascinating how to do it. And as learning and development practitioners, this changes the way in which we think about skills, human only skills or human plus AI skills. How do we think about that in order to driving that? But that's a whole nother topic. We could spend a half a day talking about that. So this real quick, one of the things we did early on, and we've seen this as a great practice going out, is the way in which you start to think about integrating AI into how you're into your teams, into your organization. We put together guidelines for, and this was for GP Strategy specifically, but several organizations have started this. We wrapped around some guidelines that whatever we applied AI towards, we wanted some guidelines or guardrails, and how would we be thinking about it and how we would apply it, because when we started this journey, we weren't really sure what was going to come out. And I guarantee in the next 2 years, it's still going to continue to evolve. But really thinking about it going through is saying, no matter what we're doing with AI, privacy and security are paramount to us. We want to make sure that whatever we're building and implementing is reliable and safe. It's inclusive in its nature. Does it bring the humans together, or does it isolate and separate the tools that we're bringing together? So we want to think about being able to bring things that enable the humans to do the uniquely human things, to connect, collaborate, to work together. So we want to make sure we reinforce that. Accountability. In the end, it has to come back that as humans in the equation, we are accountable for what it's outputting. And transparency when we're using these kind of tools, how we're using the data with the tools. And the last one is really around fair and equitable access. And this is important so that we don't create this growing divergence between the haves and have-nots when you talk about a very powerful tool such as AI. So whatever we're trying to pull out there, whether it's integrating an AI-driven coaching app or other tools that we're bringing to bear, we're keeping these guidelines in mind and how we're using them, how we're developing, and how we're applying them in general. So I think that's great to be able to kind of show some examples. And Alyssa, we got some examples of what AI can or does do, and we're going to hit that here in a second. So thank you for calling that out in the chat window. So Julian's going to show us some things here in a second as an example, and then we can definitely follow back up in the Q&A. All right, let's jump to the next slide as well. This is just to give you an idea of how we look at the function of what I would consider an AI app being able to work. So if you think of like, an applied ChatGPT tool to something, this is an example. So the core is you have the user here in the light blue, and then you've got the Gen AI app in the middle, which is basically I input my request or my query into it, or I'm going to complete a task. And then there's access to a data set that it's going to pull information, and it's accessing a large language model. So just very quickly, one of the things that we did for ourselves is we were creating a bot, so an RFP bot. So we get RFPs for outsourcing, for example, learning services. And so we'll get 300 question bids. And having been on these, I know I've written variations of those 300 questions tons of times. So the first thing we did is we created that app overlay, which allows us to kind of upload those questions into it. And we wanted to look at the data set, the repository of all the places that we have written the answers to these questions before. But we wanted to be able to focus on ours, for example, our data, our information. And we wanted to be able to generate a response for those. So to get like a 75, 80% answer. So it'll look at our data set and apply that large language model, which in our case is GPT-4 in our Azure environment. So it's part of our actual Microsoft secure environment, our data. So this is all internal. We're not going out externally to ChatGPT, but the idea is here is that as a user, I go in, can you help me generate these answers to these 300 questions? And instead of spending the next 5 days trying to figure out, I know I've written that somewhere else, it's able to not only find the variations of that, but come back with a 75 or 80% answer that now I, as a solutioner, can actually start to really refine and say, what is going to be unique in answering the needs of this particular future customer or client. But I also want to make sure that I'm not also having it bring up a whole bunch of other client names exact. So we think about how that data is going to help us kind of, clean. So we put in their rules, like don't bring in customer data or customer names, because that would be pretty poor form to put an old customer name into a new proposal. So we have those things, we kind of look at that. But what's important are the dark blue spots around here, which really call out where the human is involved in this. So the humans in this case are involved in better understanding the data set down there in the lower left, what goes into the workflow, that data. We obviously have the humans who are going to ask the question when I upload it, how am I specifically giving it additional directions? And on the other end, when it comes out with something, I'm going to refine the inputs and the outputs with it. And then I'm going to decide when AI is ready to be released for that continuous revision, those final revisions as we're going through there. So there's two things to take away from this. You can see that it's, although it's a system that we're applying to our secure data, humans are in the process loop all the way through. So let's pull through to the next slide. And so exploring what's possible in this. So teeing it up with our first slide here, and the next slide. There you go. So we have actually a poll here, and I wanted to take a second and see how much do you think generative AI will change your organization in the next 3 years. So take a couple of seconds here, pop in your answers. All right, they're starting to pop in. Let's see, the leading answers. Oh, everything will change seems to be the current leader, although we seem to have a lot of folks that are coming in strong, that some will be affected, most won't. But it seems to be everybody's leaning, the most is at about 48, 49%. So we're doing pretty good on these here. Give it a second more. I think we've probably, looks like the popcorn's popped on this one. So final answer looks right about 46% of you all believe that it will change because of AI, or some will be highly affected, others won't be as much as well. So that seems to be a majority of where we're at. So which seems to align with what we're saying and seeing as well, as that there seems to be a lot of disruption that's coming our way with that. And I think it'll be, as humans start to find how do we collaborate and work with AI moving forward. So let's move to the next slide. So, this is from Dave Ulrich, who's been working in the HR space for a long time, and he's seen a lot of new technologies come and go. And I think that was pretty powerful when he came out to say that, it's a learn or die moment for companies. You can't really hire your way out. And this is really thinking about something that has to be that blend of build over time, as well as, require some small element, but you're not going to be able to just fully pull all that talent outside and then automatically vault your organization forward. You're going to have to integrate it and you're going to have to upskill a lot. And I think it's a pretty strong statement coming from him. And if you don't
and
know, yeah,
I
pop
think,
in. Go ahead.
Matt, isn't it, it's also that everybody wants the AI skills now. So, it used to be something new came in, a few companies would need it, but now, like one of the most advanced companies right now using AI is John Deere. And so their equipment is able to, that they put out on farms is able to now tell, does this part need tilling? Does this part need, so it can be smart farming even. So you would think, oh, I'm not competing with John Deere from talent if I'm Facebook, but yes, indeed you are competing with Facebook if you're John Deere for some of the same talent. And so this isn't one of those things where we could just wait for people to get out of school and be able to populate in it, because the technology is changing faster and more furiously than it ever has before.
Yeah, and just a couple of comments is being reinforced from Aaron and Manuel out there. I think it was interesting, made a comment about started using Excel versus those that were using calculators. And I think it's an interesting example to say, how do you have that paradigm shift? And that's a very small example of Excel. But if we're still using Excel to do basic calculations or averages or things like that, which is perfectly good for, you're not really using the full extent of the tool. I think AI will be one of those things. For those organizations that deeply integrate it, they will see a great return on investment. Others may tinker with it, and it'll be much slower on that adoption. But I think we will see pretty significant adoption over the next couple of years. Let's keep moving forward here on this one. So this one really takes a look at some of the examples in L&D that we're seeing. So these are some early use cases. So content creation, absolutely. I need to create content faster and cheaper. We're basically being able to help leverage AI as the blank page killer, for example. It's just one example. I love it in the sense that, I'm going to write a course or a storyboard or a podcast, and I have to start from scratch on it. AI can be a very powerful tool to help me kind of kill that blank page. I can use it as a creative partner. I can put ideas, I can dialogue with it to come back and forth. It can help me do that. I can ask it to write in a range of tones for a range of audiences and help me modify and shape the thinking. So really think of it as, and using that term co-pilot to help me as a designer be able to create large amounts of content quickly, to be able to go to scale with that. Efficiency and automation, summarize, organizing my notes from SME meetings. This is a great one to be able to, two things is not only working with my subject matter expert, but allowing me to be able to get up to speed faster. I mean, sometimes I'll get like a ton of data from subject matter experts, and being able to use AI to help summarize, to be able to kind of give me the cliff notes with the references back into it so I can quickly get up to speed, so I can ask more insightful questions in my dialogue with SMEs. Great example with that one. Learning experience. I need it to be more engaging and personalized, being able to identify solutions or drawing upon the range of designs we've done in the past to be able to feed that, to have it to be, again, that design co-pilot, to come up with different ways we can mix and match interaction styles to extend the learning experience. Being able to meet a range of moments of learning need that allows us to kind of extend that. So not just the first time we're learning something, but when something changes, when something goes wrong, we can now start to be able to get into those, because the lift is less for us to be able to extend and go deeper into that experience. Analytics, I need to find data trends on content usage in my LMS. I need to be able to do, and I think we're applying semantic analysis with a lot of heavy human oversight on that, but being able to look at the qualitative data that we're getting back from end users or end learners in the experience, to be able to look for things that we just didn't see before at scale. And then skills. I need to identify and evaluate skills and the flow of work. How can we actually make sure that we're enabling and reinforcing and growing those skills? So what are the right ones? Map them back to the content. So these are just, 5 areas that kind of open up several different places that we are able to do that. And I see we've got some folks that can also are dropping in some great examples in here. I love to see that. I want to kind of drive us to the next one. And so Julian's going to take us through a really tight couple of examples here. So Julian, take it away.
Thanks, Matt. And hi, everyone. Julian Mackey with the UpLimit team. Super excited to continue the conversation. And, as a lot of folks are already calling out in the chat here, as we think about the human plus AI equation, there's a lot of opportunities of, where we see this specifically applied to the learning and development space. And Matt already called out several of these use cases, but as Uplimit has worked with tens of thousands of learners from Fortune 50 to innovative small startups over the last few years, we've started to see a few use cases of where AI is being deployed emerge that are really driving a lot of that sort of efficiency and outcomes. The first is active hands-on learning. Again, Matt mentioned this, but for the last several years, we've really seen the emergence of learning programs that are relying on sort of the passive learning, right? Using videos and readings. How can we transition to more of like practice scenarios and really opportunities for active learning? The second is around personalized support. So, historically, organizations have had to choose between, on one hand, scale, and on the other hand, really personalized, hands-on, high-touch support for their learning programs. And AI, through some of the examples we talked through earlier, provides an opportunity to scale that. And the third is, of course, around content. And I see a lot of the folks in the chat have already called that out. But how can you really accelerate the time to market for your courses? We'll go into that in a bit more detail. So if we can jump to the next slide. Starting with active hands-on learning. So actually, I think Aaron Faulkner in the chat already called this out as an example, but we've seen some really interesting examples of how companies are integrating chatbots into the learning experience to drive active learning. That may start, on one hand with things like, how are you preparing for the course? Using it as an opportunity to have more interactive reflection questions where you're actually having a conversation with the chatbot. And then on the other hand, we're starting to see companies use this really for specific scenarios, whether it's for coaching or mentoring or preparing for certain activities. So one example, we're working with an organization that is building a performance management course, and they've trained the chatbot on their specific performance management framework to help managers prepare for a performance conversation. So it's not just that they're, practicing that conversation, but it's specific to their organization, and it's incorporating the specific framework that is relevant to how their managers are going to then have conversations with their direct reports. And it offers that opportunity to, really practice those skills before you then have those real life conversations. Something else I wanted to call out here, because I think it's relevant to another question that was raised in the Q&A portion of sort of how can companies make these custom and kind of going back to the human in the loop. Not only are folks on our teams the ones that are developing the prompts and making sure that the frameworks, in this case the performance management framework that's being used, relevant to their organization, but in a lot of cases they're able to see the outputs of these chatbots so that they can coach the chatbot over time to be a more effective coach. Okay, so let me move forward to the next slide here. So again, personalized support, a lot of organizations we've spoken to are looking for opportunities to provide really hands-on coaching and mentoring to all of their learning programs. But we only have so many hours in the day, and the tasks of kind of checking in with every learner who's going through every one of your learning programs can be quite burdensome, and having the data to do that effectively can be quite difficult. And this is an area in particular where we think AI is quite strong, because it can, using data available through your learning program, interact with learners at the right time, interact with the right kinds of learners. So what you're seeing here are personalized messages that are going out to learners, some of which who have completed a project, some of which who haven't completed a project, and they're getting those personalized nudges in a way that feels very specific to them at the right time. And what that looks like for us is, we're working with a Fortune 50 company who is offering a kind of capability academy. And for them, it was very important that they have that hands-on, high touch support for all of their learners, but they only have one person who's supporting that program. And as a result, they're only able to reach, say, a couple dozen learners a year. Now, through AI, starting to scale some of these sort of touch points, they're able to reach hundreds of learners a year while maintaining that same kind of learner experience. And so through AI, we see that learning teams are not only able to, create more programs, but they're also able to reach more learners. And then I think the final one, if we just want to jump forward a slide, is around scalable content. And I think this was sort of an obvious use case for a lot of organizations as soon as generative AI became available. And, where we're seeing this used most frequently is accelerating the work that a lot of instructional designers are doing, as well as subject matter experts, to really create that first draft of a course. We're always going to require learning experts and subject matter experts to do the editing, to make sure that the content is accurate, that it's reliable, that it's as specific as possible. But AI really provides an opportunity to take a first pass. Where we've seen, I think a lot of advancements here is not only just creating a course from sort of what's available through Gen AI, which is often the internet, but pointing it towards very specific materials that you may have at your organization. So examples that I've seen include product documentation, talks that were given at, company all hands, things like, white papers, existing course materials. How can you take all of that content that's already out there, maybe sitting on your LMS, maybe sitting with another team, use that content to create the first course and essentially train AI in a secure and safe way on that content. The idea there being that it, massively saves your time and the subject matter experts that you're partnering with. So
yeah,
those
Julian, I grew up as
Go
an
ahead, Carrie.
instructional designer, and I can't tell you how many times I'd go to a subject matter expert and they'd hand me a stack this big of stuff and say, everything you need to know is in there, go after it. And it's like, oh my God. And now, they can kind of do that, I think, with AI. They can say everything is in these 7 links and you can ingest it. You can have the person ingest things and use that as your source, and it gets pretty close for your first outline then with your SME, which I think is really helpful. I think the other thing that's very interesting is the number of widgets, gadgets, and tools that are starting to be incorporated in it, because right now it's still a little text heavy. But moving quickly to simulations, role plays, especially with the release of 4.0, which we'll talk a little bit about next. So this is advancing every few weeks to months in terms of what it's looking like and doing.
Absolutely. So Carrie, do you want to talk us through, you already mentioned.
What do we got on the next slide here? Oh, yes. So if you haven't had a chance to go look at 4.0, there's on YouTube, there's something called 7 professional use cases for 4.0. And one of them, and you can find this in several places. This is Sal Khan from Khan Academy, and he's interacting with GPT 4.0 on having it teach his son a geometry problem. And it's really interesting to see how interactive GPT is with his son in coaching him and guiding him. There's another example of someone who just sits in front of the camera and says, hey, I have an interview coming up. How do I look? And the camera that just 4.0 looks at him and says, well, if you're going for the look of I stayed up all night coding, you've got that nailed. And so it says maybe you might want to run a comb through your hair, and offers some other tips. So the kinds of things, and that's only a few weeks old. So how this is going to be incorporated into apps and other things, I think is going to be really interesting, and very soon as well. So let's
Yeah,
move
Carrie,
on. Yeah.
really quickly on that example, I think going back to sort of the hands-on practice and some of those opportunities that I mentioned earlier, we're already seeing that, now start to play out in different modalities, including audio. So, if you think about that conversation around performance management, where you're practicing that conversation before you meet with your direct report, we're now seeing companies use audio. So you can actually kind of, while you're in the car, while you're going through the course, start to actually have a pretty realistic conversation. So, making it audio based rather than text based.
Yeah, and video. I mean, it's just moving into, all kinds of interesting areas. And it's the first time in my career, I took my way all the way through what they call a terminal degree, and so I rely heavily on research. But it's the first time where I look up something, and if it's more than 3 months old, I'm thinking, okay, well, this is out of date because things are changing so fast. But Gartner says that 80% of organizational skills are going to have to be reprioritized or revisited because of all of this transformation that's happening. Yet only 13% of employees said that in 2023 they got training on AI. So I think we're starting to see kind of a mismatch that's starting to happen here. 82% of executives, according to McKinsey, see reskilling as critical to business success. So I'm of the belief that we're going to have a much stronger pull on learning to be able to help people keep up with these evolving skills. And next slide, which leads to some of the things that we're thinking about. So some of these slides are pulled from a course that we have at GP on Human Plus AI for learning leaders. And Julian's going to tell you a little bit about what we think is necessary as a curriculum and that we offer in partnership with them through AI for Everyone plus AI technical skills. And then there's also how to think about what a learning function needs to be aggregating as a collection of tools and processes for AI. So with that, I think I'll turn it back over to you, Julian, to talk a little bit about some of the things that we're seeing people start to train their organizations on as part of a more holistic curriculum, including, with us starting with learning leaders, but then you branch out then to the whole organization. So next slide, please.
Thanks, Carrie. Yeah, UpLimit's super excited to be partnering with GP Strategies to work with organizations to upskill, broad variety of teams in AI. A lot of what we've talked about today in terms of both, evolving the skill sets at a company to effectively leverage AI, or, making sure that folks are aware of AI in ways that not only helps them, take advantage of the benefits, but also avoid the risks. We think a lot of this is really achieved through effective upskilling programs. So I'll walk through sort of what UpLimit and GP Strategies AI Academy looks like in a little bit of detail. At a high level, the AI Academy includes courses from industry experts that include hands-on activities. So this isn't just, watching videos, it's also, practicing with AI, building chatbots, things of that nature, as well as real-world examples. All of these programs are focused on, actually, how do we get people to complete? And most importantly, how can we make sure that people are leveraging these skills back on their job? So 95% of learners who've gone through these programs reporting that they're using the skills back in their job. And I think a lot of that speaks to, one of the other questions I saw in Q&A around, folks who are nervous about or perhaps see that their organization is nervous about, how their role is going to be impacted. I think we see that everyone's role is going to be impacted in some way or another. And the key is making sure that folks have the skills that they need to effectively leverage AI in their work. And so there's sort of two main areas, if we can move forward a slide, that we're working with organizations. One is AI course content for non-technical teams. And then the other, as you might guess, is AI for technical teams. So starting with actually, if we could go back a slide, starting with AI for non-technical teams. This is really for folks who are looking at upskilling or driving kind of broad literacy and awareness of AI throughout their organization. So we really have what we consider sort of the flagship program, which is AI and ChatGPT for Everyone. It's a 2-week course that gives people that strong foundation. What is AI? We're working with a Fortune 500 consumer goods brand that, after sort of an internal AI day of awareness, they looked at people who are interested in sort of learning more, right? Who are raising their hand like, yes, I'm enthusiastic about AI and how it might work for the kind of team that I'm on. And they've rolled out this program throughout their organizations to folks in marketing teams, finance teams, sales teams, and of course, people teams. We also provide a pretty wide range of electives, including responsible AI, AI strategy for leaders, people who are making decisions about where to deploy AI, as well as functionally. So we have courses in AI in sales and AI in marketing. We're working with one organization that's really at the forefront of a lot of innovation in health manufacturing, and AI is a big part of their products that they're now selling in the market, and they want to make sure that their sales teams are equipped with the knowledge and terminology of what is AI, and also as an added benefit, how can they use it to be more productive as a sales team. Looking at the technical offerings, if we jump forward a slide, this is another area where we see a lot of interest from organizations who are looking at, how can they make sure that their technical teams, so whether that's data scientists, data engineers, software engineers, have the cutting edge skills that they need to take advantage of this technology. So we provide sort of a foundation in machine learning, as well as a number of really cutting edge programs, from LLMs in production to building RAG applications. And these have been, I think, really exciting in a few different ways. One, just in how we deliver these courses, they're very up to date. So every time there's a new technology, which, as you can imagine, seems like it's every week, these programs are being updated. They're focused on hands-on learning. One of the projects that I saw in a course recently involved learners creating a chatbot to create a transcript of their favorite podcast, and then using a program to send themselves weekly a summary of that transcript to their email. And so we really believe that a lot of the work around AI and understanding its use cases involve really that hands-on work and getting in the weeds with building and interacting with it, because that ultimately drives comfort and some of those efficiencies that we've talked through. So really excited to work with GP as well as a number of different customers of theirs. And with that, I think I'll hand it back to Carrie and Matt.
All right. Well, we've got a few minutes left here to see if there's Q&A. Kim, are you able to answer, are the slides going to be sent out?
Yes, I did answer that. Yes, of course. We always send out the slides and a copy of the recording today, so you'll probably get it from me tomorrow morning.
So there's a question from Aaron as well. Thank you, Kim, for that. I did see Aaron popped in one here. It says, am I responsible for our organization's AI learning strategy? I have a decent start, but would love to learn more about some of these offerings. It says I am responsible for that, if I said that wrong. So I think, where could she learn more about this? I think it's the question coming back to that. So
yeah, and I think
Go ahead, Karen.
So I think that's just a follow-up, right? Not to, yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think Malin's comment on combining LMS with AI on it, I think what we can anticipate going forward is that all software just about in the world is going to have AI built into it, whether it's an LMS or Salesforce has been really super actively adding AI into its software, and it's going to get multimodal. So it's going to be that you can talk to your software and you can interact with your software like you interact with humans, all the way back to the part of Matt talking about having a peer that is AI generated. That is one of the ways that it'll be doing that.
Harry and Matt, we have a few questions in the Q&A, if you'd like to take those.
Yep.
Okay. So there's a question here on how do you put the checks and balances for AI to ensure that the information it is putting out is accurate and not causing more work for humans?
So I think there was a couple of things that we talked about. First off, deciding what data you're going to aim the AI at working with. So you can constrain the world from which AI is pulling. It doesn't have to be, it's going out to the open internet and taking everything from there. You can use it as a tool against your own set of data. So for example, as we've been experimenting with this inside GP, not only do we constrain the world, we don't want the AI to go to courses we might have developed privately for another customer. So we constrain it to only things to do with a customer or publicly available content. We also can feed it our instructional design standards. So we have several hundred pages of training that we use for training new instructional designers. And we can feed that into the model to say, not only use this content, but we want you to use these standards and these style guides and these processes and so on. So everything would be, you've improved the quality of what you're going to have by the quality of what you feed it. Mm-hmm. And the quality of what you feed it is going to include those standards, anything you can refer to. I mean, I've seen people, if they don't have a whole set of standards like that, just say use Bloom's principles of solid instructional design. I mean, this is where getting your prompting down and starting to build a prompt library really helps, which we didn't touch on much today, but is one of the key aspects there. Matt, do you want, or Julie?
Yeah, I mean, I was just going to say that one of the biggest things we're seeing in EnergyWise is really building out that AI data strategy. Data strategy incorporates AI underneath of it. If you think of the large language model, like the GPTs we're seeing as engines, the data is the fuel. So being able to help, create the ways in which it's structured so that it helps actually provide the insights that you're looking for. Some of the things we're seeing is that it's less, I mean, hallucinations are real, but accessing and pulling up data that may be outdated or not appropriate for that. These are things to kind of be thinking about. And what I mean by that, and it's a nuance, but it's important. Think of it in the LMD space. So one of the things we're looking at is how do you take like a WBT course and say, hey, I've got a 30-minute WBT and I want to be able to create a summary, an abstract, or a 5-minute version of that. That existing course may have a quiz at the end of it, which will have answers, 1 right answer, 3 wrong answers. Now, that's not incorrect data, but AI doesn't always know the difference between the two within that. So that as we start to incorporate and rely on data sets, we need to understand the nature of the data within it, how to help drive those guidelines to help do that. It makes it a lot more easy, as Carrie was saying, to be conversational. But I think that's going to be one of the things is organizations really stepping up their data strategy to get the most out of the powerful tools we're seeing.
Great, thanks, Matt and Carrie. I do have one question I want to get to before the end of it, and I think it's the human part of it. The question is, how do you suggest we ease the fear of our employees that are afraid about their jobs being taken away?
Yeah, well, I think there's 2 things that we touched on during the presentation today. One is already the example of Microsoft, where 46% of code has been written by AI, but 46% of developers haven't lost their jobs. Or an equal example would be, everybody thought bank tellers would go away when ATMs were introduced, and instead there were more bank tellers because people wanted the convenience and service of an ATM and a bank branch in their neighborhood instead of just the one big central bank downtown. So I think that's really one set of answers, and the other is when Matt did the quote of, I think one way to help people feel more comfortable is if they know something about AI and they are someone who can use AI as part of their everyday work, and realize that it's not going to be that AI is just replacing people, but people who have AI skills could be replacing people who don't have AI skills. And so making sure they're emphasizing getting the skills they need to be able to leverage this powerful tool and be a more productive human.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so Mainland did, her question specifically was, do you guys think that in the future AI and LMS can be together?
Yeah, I think we answered that one.
Okay.
All software is going to have AI.
Good.
Yeah.
All right, and we are at the end. I just have one more question that came through. How can AI help improve productivity in a thermal combined cycle plant?
I think that's Carrie's.
I worked in a nuclear power plant, so I think I could come after this one. I think every job is going to have the ability to have things that we hadn't ever thought of. You're sitting with a blank piece of paper and you need to let somebody be aware that there's a quality issue somewhere. AI can help write that email, especially if you say, I want the tone to be a certain level and I want this, that, and the other. I mean, as simple as helping you construct an email. And I think that will help people, for example, in places where safety is a very important thing, be able to bring up issues more comfortably because they've got a partner in helping them write a safe message to send out. So I'd be just the tiniest little one thing, even helping you write an email to document safety concerns. Mm-hmm. But tons of other things. I'd be happy to talk with you about ways to do that.
Great. Thank you. We are at the top of the hour. So I want to thank Carrie, Matt, and Julian for taking the time today to share your information with us. I want to also thank everybody on the call today for your time and attention. And as always, be sure to visit GP Strategies website for our upcoming webinars, and we hope to see you again. Thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful rest.
This webinar was brought to you by GP Strategies. Together, we help organizations transform through their people. You can access more webinars or download additional resources by visiting the GP Strategies Resource Library. The link is on your screen and in the description.